Hello everyone, I'm Zahid from Talks at Innovation Valley, and today we have a very amazing guest, Thomas Hoger. Thomas is the co-founder and CEO of Three Spin Learning, an award-winning no-code and AI virtual reality platform that enables organizations like Pfizer, Lufthansa, and Mark to easily scale immersive training for hundreds of learners. So, first of all, I really warm welcome you, Thomas.
Thank you, Zaid. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome and thanks for joining. So, Thomas, before we jump to the topic and questions, I would love my audience to know about your story, from where you got your education, from where you got your professional journey, and how you get to this domain, virtual reality.
I originally studied at a German university. The study course was called Media System Design. So it's a bit of a mix between programming, design, economics, and virtual reality and augmented reality were already a big topic for us back then. That was in 2004. So I've been working with the technologies for quite a while. Um, with a friend that I studied with, I ran a digital agency, and we were also working with VR and AR there. And then during that time in the agency, we got a very inspiring project with virtual reality where we trained pilots, and the results from that were so amazing that this really made us decide that we only wanted to do VR and AR, and specifically within learning. So Oliver and I, who ran the agency, we reinvested all the earnings that we got from the agency and started what we are doing today, which is Three Spin Learning, the VR and AR learning platform.
All right. Uh, Great insight. Thomas, our topic is very, very wide, and it's really
True.
interesting how AR, VR, and artificial intelligence can transform education. So, my first question is, how do you see augmented reality being integrated into classrooms, and what benefits can it bring to the learning experience?
Yeah, yeah. You already said that it's a very wide topic, and I think maybe before I answer that question, it's important for the audience to know that the lines between virtual reality and augmented reality get blurred more and more. So it used to be very separate, but there are more and more headsets coming to the market that enable to do both VR and AR. So that's just important to know that it's not easy to differentiate the two so much in the future. But if you look at the traditional augmented reality technology, and if you look at headsets, then it's for classroom integration, it's a little bit difficult to integrate headsets for augmented reality in the near term because they are still quite expensive. VR headsets are more affordable. And I believe that the integration will, in the beginning, come more through tablets or PCs. So not so much through specific augmented reality headsets. And I think for the integration into the classroom, one of the key factors will be content creation, not even the headsets. I think it will be important that there will be specific content for the needs of the learners in the classroom. So I think the key to growth is to make content creation accessible for students through no-code tools paired with AI that make content creation easier. And I think in the beginning, if you are looking at headsets, it will be more used through VR headsets rather than AR headsets. And the benefit is really that you can bring virtual characters and virtual environments into the classroom that you otherwise couldn't access or see. And that ultimately makes learning more engaging and memorable, and thus more successful.
All right. So, okay. And uh, virtual reality has gained popularity in various industries. How can VR applications enhance education and make it more engaging for students?
Yeah. So if you look at students, and if we are looking at students in schools in particular, I think you see a big difference between how they behave outside of classroom and inside of the classroom, obviously. And I think it's a little bit exaggerated, but if you look at students outside of the classroom, they are playing in the yard, they are having fun, and then they go back to the classroom and they sit in front of their textbook, and then they have to learn the exact date of when the Colosseum in Rome was built. And I think that VR really gives us the opportunity to radically change that, because through the technology, students will be able to travel to the Colosseum back in that time, recreated a virtual Colosseum, and they can go inside and they can um, marvel at the architecture or learn about the cruelties that happened inside that building. And I think that's much longer lasting in the memory and more impactful also, than learning about the date of when it was built, really experiencing what happened there and how it was made. So I think that will be a drastically different kind of learning. And the only other way to do this at the moment, and even with that, you couldn't fully do it. You would need to travel there, and that would cost a lot of money. And schools, they do it maybe once a year or less. And even if you did that, if you went there physically, which is important, by the way, I'm not saying that we need to or should replace that, but even if you go there, you cannot experience it the way you can in VR, because you can recreate scenarios that you cannot recreate in real life anymore. That's my take.
All right. Thomas, artificial intelligence is becoming increasingly prevalent in education. Could you share some examples of AI powered tools that have already made a positive impact on the learning process?
Yeah. So I can tell you about two main features that we are currently working on because we believe they will make a really big impact. One is that we are going to integrate AI into our platform through virtual characters. So you will be able, inside any learning scenario, you will be able to speak to virtual characters. And we are starting with something called a helper companion. So it's a little robot that is floating around that is there to guide learners. But ultimately, you could talk to doctors, astronauts, historical figures. So you could create any kind of virtual character in AI. That's one of the main benefits that I see. The other is to fasten content creation even more. So currently we already have no code tools that make it very easy. And part of that will become AI enhanced content creation, where maybe a learner wants to go to the moon to learn about the solar system and the Earth. So they could just type moon with a view at Earth, and that would create the environment just like that. So those are those are two key features that I see make a really big impact.
All right. With the emergence of AR, VR, and AI technologies, how do you think the role of educators will evolve in the future?
Mm. Yeah, I think on the one hand, learning will become much more experiential and less theoretical. So I think a lot of the content that we use today in a digital form, they have been transformed into PDFs or PowerPoint presentations or whatever because of cost reasons. So it was cheap to do it, but it's really content that is meant to be hands-on and experiential. So practical learning will become much more affordable and will replace a lot of that theoretic content that has just turned into theoretic content because it was cheap. And yeah, like learning on the moon. It's one example that I already named. So I think educators need to adapt to that new radical change of learning becoming more practical again. And I think if they embrace these opportunities, that will learners will also thank them for that, because it will be more engaging and more fun. And I think a second trend that is really important for educators is the creator economy. So I think more and more learning content will be created by the educators themselves, or even by the students. So we have organizations, enterprises that have trainees or apprentices, so young learners that come right out of school, and they let them create learning content themselves. So I think it's going to be a big trend that more content creation will come out of the learning organizations like schools, universities, but even enterprises, and they can cater the content specifically to their need instead of just buying something that is supposedly really expensive, and have that made cater their needs. Yeah, I think those are two main trends that we will see.
All right. Uh, Thomas, what are the potential challenges in implementing augmented reality, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence in educational setting, and how can they be overcome?
Yeah, I think one of the main burdens, especially for educational institutions, is cost. So, on the one hand, hardware needs to be affordable. We already talked about AR headsets, for example, being still too expensive for educational institutions. Enterprises, it's okay. They have been using like Microsoft HoloLens for a couple of years, depending on the use case. It's totally worth it, paying a few thousand for one headset. But it needs to be affordable. Hardware needs to be affordable, and content creation needs to be affordable. And one of the yeah one of the key things is that the content creation, we need to give it into the hands of the organizations, so that they don't need to go to an agency and let them code some kind of experience, but rather enable them to create it very easily themselves. I think that's yeah, that's one of the key factors. And also I think it involves being pragmatic. So that being pragmatic means that it doesn't always need to be a headset. That's what I'm saying. So you can also do immersive learning on a PC or on a tablet. And of course, it won't be as amazing, but I think we need to look at what we are comparing it with. And if we are comparing it with the PowerPoint slides with the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire questions, then it's still way better. And it's much cheaper. And the same goes for the content itself. So does it always need to be 3D, fully 3D? Or is sometimes a 360 photo sufficient, which is easier to create? So yeah, being pragmatic about how you access the content and how you create the content will overcome that burden of cost, I think.
All right. Can you elaborate on some successful case studies where these technologies have significantly improved the learning outcomes?
Yeah, I can tell you of one project we did with an enterprise client, Lufthansa. So within Lufthansa, they have a cargo company that's part of the Lufthansa group. So they ship air cargo. And the difficulty for them is that the learners, they need to undergo certification before they can enter the actual place where the cargo shipping happens. So if they could go there, then they could learn practically how to ship cargo, but they can't go there before they get certification. So they have this issue that it's difficult for learners to learn practically, and it's a very hands-on job. And they introduced augmented reality. So they brought the cargo shipments into the classroom and let the learners learn it hands-on. And they evaluated that scientifically with the university. And what they managed to do is they lowered the fail rates in exams by 80%. 80, it's 80. So it's very significant drop in fail rates, which is amazing. So all these people who do not fail in the exams, they do not need to come to the exam again. They don't need to stay in a hotel again. They don't need to have catering anymore for a second time. So it saves a lot of money, and also obviously saves a lot of frustration if you can manage to be successful in the first go.
All right. Thomas, accessibility is a crucial aspect of education. How can AR, VR, and AI be utilized to cater to diverse learners, including those with disabilities?
Yeah, it's a very it's a very powerful technology in that regard, I think. So it lets you can put people in a place or in a perspective that they otherwise couldn't have. So if you imagine how it would feel like to be bullied, for example, in school, you can actually put someone into that perspective and show them how it feels like to be maybe a minority and being bullied about that. And I think that sends a very powerful message that sticks and lasts, rather than just talking about it. And also regarding disability, for example, imagine someone who is immobile. They couldn't travel anymore. And we can just bring them to places they otherwise couldn't go. So I think those are two very, very powerful examples where technology can help with these two topics you mentioned.
All right. Data privacy and security are paramount concerns when dealing with AI and student data. What measures should be taken to ensure that students' information remains protected?
Yeah, it's an issue for both enterprises and educational institutions. Um, especially here in Europe where we are based. So we have many clients who demand that we do not capture their data, and we don't. And we promise this to them. So we have a lot of tracking capabilities. So we have features where you could do tracking even without AI. But we disable these features when the product comes out of the box. So organizations, whether universities, schools, or enterprises, they need to actively activate these features to use the tracking capabilities. And for European clients, we also often have to promise that the server is in a specific location, maybe only in Germany, and it's GDPR compliant. So it is a big issue. And we will do the same with AI functionality. We are adding more and more AI functionality at the moment, and we will also make that disabled. We disabled that in the beginning, so companies, they have to activate it. But I think in the long term, AI becomes crucial part of every product. It will be in every inch of a product, and I think it will be very difficult to deactivate it. And I think even if you wanted to deactivate it, you will be left behind. That's a really, really big issue. If you're not using it, then others will outpace you. So I think to make sure that AI is really that really respects your data, I think we need some kind of regulation on a global scale, which won't be easy because if it's only a few countries who would regulate it, then what about the others? They would outpace the other countries. They would be faster. So I think it's not easy, but I do believe we need some kind of fair regulation on a global scale.
All right. How do you envision AR, VR, and AI bridging the gap between traditional and online learning methods? What are the prospects for AR, VR, and AI in lifelong learning and professional development?
Yeah, to answer that, we probably have to first answer what are the gaps between traditional learning and online learning. So one of the gaps is physical presence. So in online learning, you can't be somewhere, or you can't feel as if you were somewhere. It also sometimes, not always, sometimes lacks real-time engagement with educators, lecturers, trainers. It can also lack social interaction with students. And obviously, it lacks hands-on experience or experience overall, as it's more theoretical. So these are just four gaps. There are probably more, but if you look at those, I think that VR and AR can really bridge that gap, because it's online learning, it's scalable, but it doesn't have these shortcomings. So those can be very well addressed, because in VR and AR, you do feel physical presence. You are present in a spatial environment. You can interact with educators. You can interact with other students. You can learn together. You experience things visually. You even have motor memories. You experience them with your body. I mean, you can't actually touch them, but it's a very visual and bodily experience that you have compared to online learning. So it's a bit more. It's very 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 much more like traditional learning was, which became impossible to do because of cost, or where a lot of learning was transferred into online learning because of cost.
Some critics argue that these technologies might lead to a reduction in human interaction. How can we strike a balance between technology interaction and maintaining meaningful human connections in education?
I I think it's I don't know where that comes from, or maybe I do. I think it comes from a time where you would put on a headset and you were all by yourself. So people thought it was not social, and that's not the case anymore. So I think it's even the opposite, to be honest. I think VR is a very connecting and very social technology on a global level, even. So you can bring together people from different places to interact socially who otherwise couldn't. So if we look again at so I talked earlier about a company that has apprentices who create their own learning experiences. And actually, these apprentices are distributed across the country here in Germany. They are in different places. So usually they wouldn't be able to meet, or on very rare occasions only. And through their VR experience, so any VR experience they build in our platform is automatically has multi-user capability. So they can go into any course and come together, learn together, socially interact. So it's really exactly the opposite of not being social. It really connects people. But I can understand where that comes from. Yeah, because it used to be different, right?
All right. What steps are being taken to ensure teachers are adequately trained and prepared to utilize these advanced technologies effectively?
So what's necessary for the educators?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's a very fast pace that the technology is advancing. Not only VR and AR, but also AI. So it's sometimes difficult um, to keep track, and they have to do that. They have to embrace it because students are growing up with that kind of technology, and they already use it at home, playing Beat Saber in a VR headset or playing Roblox. So I think we need to make sure that it is being used in schools and universities, because otherwise the technology gap is becoming even bigger. How we do it, um, with an open mind, that's easy to say, but maybe we could even turn around the role a little bit. Maybe these young people who know about the technology, or who've grown up with it, maybe they can even teach educators in that regard. Um, that way, I could imagine the relationship between students and educators could even strengthen. So that learning is not only a one-way street, but it's actually something that where people with different knowledge can teach each other. That's one idea. We could do it.
All right. Emerging technologies, including AI, have the potential to personalize learning experiences. How can educators leverage these technologies to cater to individual student needs?
Yeah, it has a lot of capabilities in that regard. So through AI, the experiences they could adjust in difficulty, they could adjust in the learning style, in pace, based on progress of the learners. But not only through AI, it's also controllable, and you can individualize it as an educator. So, for example, we have something that I call a remote control in our platform, so that educators can create some kind of out-of-the-box learning experience that's the same for every learner. But then when the learners are inside the experience, the educators can control them from the outside. So they have a remote control where they can make changes on the fly, depending on what the learners do in that moment. Then also they can be individualized through very easy multi-language, different languages in the scenario through AI. They can give feedback based on the actions of the learners. So depending on what the learners did, they get individual assessments, and they can get real-time guidance, right? So the one feature that I talked about earlier, where we have this helper companion that is inside the learning scenario guiding the learners, that reacts to anything that particular learner does. So whatever the learner says, the helper companion will react to that specifically. So there's a lot of potential for individualized learning experiences through AI that can be leveraged, super personalized learning experiences.
All right. In your opinion, what does the future of education look like with the continuous development and adoption of AR, VR, and AI?
Yeah, it's really the sum of everything that we discussed today, right? So we have the potential that learning in the future becomes much more engaging through immersive technologies. It will enable us to go anywhere, to experience anything that we want. These experiences, as we just said, can be highly personalized. Um, the technology makes learning more accessible on a global scale in places where certain things couldn't be experienced. They can be brought there to anyone, anywhere. It will bring us together really on a global scale. We don't have to travel that much anymore, and we don't have to replace travel, but it's a really big opportunity to come together more often in very collaborative spaces. I think it's really revolutionary for learning. If I may compare it, I think of it really as a piece of art that in the past was sitting in a museum somewhere in one location, and where you would stand in the distance and look at it through glass. And now that piece of art becomes something that is that you can step into. You can go inside the piece of art and experience it with all your senses together with others. That's really how revolutionary I think immersive technology and AI are for learning.
All right. Thomas, trust me, it was really insightful conversation with you. And I'm really thankful to you for joining. And this was the last question. And in the last, I would request you that can you please give any advice or message to my audience, which are university students, teachers, entrepreneurs, and startup founders? Any inspiring message that could change their life?
Not sure about changing their life instantly, but the thing with immersive technologies is that you really have to experience them. You asked one skeptical question about people thinking that it's not social and so on. And I think we need to embrace the technology, and the only way to do it is not only talking about it, which is also important, and we did that today, but it is really trying it out. I'm very convinced it's a very revolutionary technology, and people should try it. There's a filmmaker, a 360-degree filmmaker that I love to quote. So he's making movies that are in 360, and he once said that talking about virtual reality is like dancing about architecture. Just let that sink in. It is something that people need to try, and then they will realize what the technology can do for education.
All right. Um, Thomas, in the last very interesting thing that I would like to ask that I forgot in the during the questions, you know, there are many people on the social media and many even media agencies. What they say, AI will replace the human beings. AI will kill every job. AI will finish the world. The world is going to be finished because of the AI. AI will take over. This is a fear. How
Yes,
can, what do you say on these all these statements?
I can understand these assumptions, and I think it's not. We cannot just say there's no risk involved. There's always risk with any new technology. I think it can be used for good, but it can also be used for bad things. And I think there are people who come up with ideas how you can use it, and they are just excited about the opportunities. And on the same, and we need a balanced uh, view on that. And I think we also need people who think about the ethical implications and about regulations and all that. So I think these two things have to be in balance. That's why I said earlier that it should be regulated. But I don't think it will put everyone out of a job. I think technology can really liberate us. And there are obviously things that will be replaced that the technology can do. But then again, this will free time to do other things. And these other things may be things that we even like more, rather than doing these repetitive tasks that an AI can easily do. So yeah, I can understand that people are afraid. I think the only thing that helps is educate people. That was the topic for today, right? Education. So we have to learn about what these technologies actually do and how they do it, and think about what they can leverage and where we need to draw a line.